No contact is supposed to give you clarity, but sometimes what it gives you instead is a message, a random check-in, a breadcrumb, a little tap on the glass, a name on your screen after silence. And if you have ever been in an avoidant attachment dynamic, you already know how dangerous that moment can feel. Because the message is small, but the emotional impact is not. Your whole body lights up. Your mind starts racing. Your hope tries to wake back up before you can even think. And the hardest part is that the message can look so harmless. It can be casual, friendly, practical, funny, soft, even warm. But what many people do not understand is that not every return is a return. Sometimes what looks like reconnection is just access checking. Sometimes they do not break no contact because they are ready. They break no contact because they want to know whether the door is still open. They want to know whether they can still reach you, whether they still matter, whether the bond is still there, whether they still have a place in your nervous system. And if you do not understand that pattern, you will give meaning to contact that was never carrying the weight you think it was. If this kind of clarity helps your nervous system settle, subscribe. PsychBond is a daily decoder for psychology, relationships, and avoidant and anxious attachment patterns so you stop guessing. This pattern keeps people stuck for months, sometimes years. Not because the contact itself is so deep, but because the contact reactivates the bond. It gives hope, just enough oxygen to start burning again. And if you have an anxious side, that tiny spark can feel like proof that the whole story is not over. So let us start with the part most people miss. Breaking no contact is not the same thing as returning with capacity. Contact is not commitment. Reaching out is not repair. Missing access is not the same thing as missing the relationship. That distinction is everything. Because avoidant people often do not come back in one clean, obvious way. They do not always return with a big confession, a clear apology, or a stable offer. Many of them come back sideways, through low-risk contact, a random question, a meme, a practical reason, a casual check-in, something that lets them re-enter your space without having to name what they are doing or what they actually want. And this is why the pattern is so confusing. The contact is real, their curiosity may be real, their feelings may even be real, but the structure is still weak. The intention is still protected. The access is being tested before any real vulnerability is offered. That is the first thing to understand. Access checking is not always a conscious evil plan. A lot of avoidant people are not sitting there saying, "Let me go manipulate this person now." What they are often doing is more automatic than that. They feel distance. They feel your absence. They feel the loss of emotional access, attention, familiarity, or reassurance. They get curious. They get uncomfortable. They wonder whether you are still there. They wonder whether they can still reach you. They wonder whether the bond still responds. So they send something small enough to stay safe, but strong enough to get a signal back. That is the move. They want information without full exposure. They want reassurance without having to carry the full weight of it. They want contact without yet stepping into the weight of what contact means. And that is where people get hurt. Because the person receiving the message is often not reading it as an access test. They are reading it through longing, history, pain, chemistry, and hope. They are reading it as, they came back. They are thinking about me. They miss me. This means something. Maybe the silence made them realize. Maybe they are ready now. Maybe this is the beginning of a real return. But that is not always what is happening. Sometimes what is happening is simpler and colder than that. Sometimes they just wanted to see whether you would still open, whether you would still answer warmly, whether you were still emotionally reachable, whether they still had a path back into your energy whenever they felt the urge. And this is exactly why this pattern can be so addictive. It creates emotional movement without relational clarity. It gives the nervous system stimulation without stability. It feels like change, but often it is just renewed access to the same loop. So let us break down what access testing usually looks like. First, the contact is often low accountability. It does not usually start with a full, grounded, honest statement. It is rarely, "I hurt you. I have been avoiding. I want to talk clearly, and I am ready to show you something different." That is not usually the opening move. The opening move is more often casual, indirect, or deniable. "Hey, random question. Saw this and thought of you. Hope you are well. How have you been? Did you ever end up doing that thing?" Or some practical excuse that technically makes sense, but does not explain why it had to be you. The message gives them an opening while protecting them from exposure. If you respond badly, they can tell themselves it was just a casual reach out. If you respond warmly, they get what they came for: information, access, emotional proof. Second, the contact often comes without real emotional weight behind it. This is important. People confuse activation with depth. Just because the message activates your body does not mean it came from a deep, grounded place in them. It may have come from curiosity, loneliness, nostalgia, ego, discomfort, boredom, emotional hunger, or fear of being forgotten. All of those things can create contact. None of them automatically create capacity. Third, the contact is often followed by inconsistency if you open the door too easily. This is one of the clearest signs that what they wanted first was access, not real rebuilding. They pop up, you respond, there is a little energy, maybe even warmth, and then, once the signal is received, they settle back again. Why? Because the test is over. The question was answered. Yes, you are still there. Yes, the bond still responds. Yes, the emotional door is still unlocked. And once they get that signal, the internal pressure that made them reach out often goes down. That is the cruel part. Your hope rises right when their anxiety drops. So now you are more activated, more attached, more open, while they feel calmer precisely because they confirmed access. This is one of the most painful mismatches in avoidant dynamics. One person treats contact as the start of something. The other treats contact as relief from uncertainty. Those are not the same thing. Now, let us talk about why avoidant people do this. There are a few common reasons. One is loss of emotional control. When you go silent, when you stop reaching, when you actually hold no contact, the avoidant person loses ambient access to you. They lose the quiet comfort of knowing you are there, available, thinking of them, emotionally oriented toward them. Even if they were not giving much, they were still benefiting from your emotional location. They knew where you were. They knew the bond was alive. When no contact is real, that certainty gets removed. And for many avoidant people, that creates tension. Not always because they suddenly want a full relationship, but because uncertainty cuts both ways. They do not want too much closeness, but they also do not fully like losing their place in your world. Another reason is identity reassurance. A lot of avoidant people regulate partly through keeping emotional options psychologically available, even if they are not actively building with them. They may not want full intimacy, but they still want to know they matter. They still want to know they can affect you. They still want to know the bond did not die just because they went quiet. So the reach out becomes a way of checking their emotional reflection in you. Do I still exist there? Do I still count? Can I still get in? Another reason is emotional hunger without relational readiness. This one matters a lot. Avoidant people can feel lonely. They can miss you. They can want comfort. They can want familiarity. They can have moments where your absence feels sharp. But emotional hunger does not automatically mean they are prepared to sustain intimacy. They may want the soothing part of connection without yet being able to carry the structure that real connection requires. So they break no contact not because they are ready for the relationship, but because they are hungry for the relief of contact. And those are two very different things. Another reason is re-regulation through your response. If you had a history where your warmth calmed them, where your availability made them feel less alone, less guilty, less rejected, or less cut off, they may reach back toward that feeling when silence starts pressing on them. Again, that does not mean the bond means nothing. It means the contact may be about regulation more than repair. And if you mistake regulation seeking for relational change, you will keep getting pulled back into the same emotional economy. Let us make this more concrete. What does an access test usually feel like from your side? It feels like interruption. You were trying to stabilize. You were trying to heal. You were trying to stop checking your phone, stop replaying the story, stop living in hope. And then the message arrives. Suddenly, the whole nervous system wakes up. You feel adrenaline, relief, confusion, longing, fear. You start reading every word. You start checking tone. You start thinking, what does this mean? Why now? Why like this? Should I answer? Should I wait? Should I be warm? Should I protect myself? This is why no contact breaks can feel so destabilizing. They do not just bring the person back into your inbox, they bring the whole pattern back into your body. That is why one tiny message can undo a week of calm. It is not because you are weak. It is because attachment is physical. Access testing works because it reopens the system. Now, here is where anxious people get trapped. The anxious mind tends to think, if they reached out, something must have shifted. But in avoidant dynamics, contact often happens before capacity, not after it. The shift may be internal discomfort, not relational growth. The shift may be loneliness, not readiness. The shift may be fear of losing access, not a plan to love you better. This does not mean every reach out is meaningless. It means you must stop assigning full meaning before behavior earns it. That is the whole game. Because access testers often rely on your hope doing the heavy lifting. They send the small signal, you build the story. They enjoy the opening, you offer warmth. They relax. And then you are left managing the emotional aftermath. That is the pattern. So, what are the most common signs that they broke no contact to test access rather than to truly return? First, the contact is light, but strategically personal. It is not fully neutral because it has just enough familiarity to wake you up. Maybe they reference an inside joke. Maybe they mention something only the two of you would understand. Maybe they send a song, a memory, a tiny emotional thread. It is personal enough to stir the bond, but still safe enough to deny deeper intention. Second, There is no real ownership. They do not name the silence clearly. They do not address what happened. They do not say what has changed. They do not acknowledge your experience in a grounded way. They act as if contact itself should be enough to reopen things. Third, they watch how available you are. This part is subtle. Once you reply, they start learning again. Are you still warm? Are you still eager? Are you still emotionally open? Will you pick up the thread quickly? Will you make it easy? The more instantly you offer full warmth, the more they learn that access is still easy. Fourth, the energy drops once reassurance is secured. This is one of the biggest tells. They come in, you respond, there is movement, and then suddenly they slow down again. Or they keep things vague. Or they do not build. Or they drift after the initial check. That drop is painful, but it is informative. Fifth, they keep the contact alive just enough to avoid closure, but not enough to create real direction. This can look like periodic check-ins, small taps, low-effort conversation, occasional warmth, and no real structure. You are neither together nor fully released. That is access without commitment. And that space can keep people stuck for a very long time. Now, let us talk about the phrase, test access, because I want to be precise. Access is not only physical contact, it is emotional reachability. It is whether they can still enter your attention, your softness, your care, your imagination, your availability. Some people do not want the responsibility of a relationship, but they still want the privilege of access. They want to be able to return when it suits their nervous system. They want to know that the line is still active. And if you keep rewarding access checks with instant emotional availability, you accidentally train the pattern. You teach them that no matter how inconsistent things were, they can still re-enter through a small side door. This is not about punishment. It is about reality. If someone wants real repair, the door does not need to be slammed. But it also should not be wide open at the first tap. Because if access is always cheap, they never have to bring more than curiosity. They never have to bring clarity. They never have to bring accountability. They never have to bring change. Your response structure teaches people what kind of contact is enough. That matters. So, what should you actually be looking at when they break no contact? Not the fact of contact alone. Look at the shape of it. Look at whether they can tolerate directness. Look at whether they name anything real. Look at whether they can sustain energy after you respond. Look at whether they build a bridge or just confirm the door. Look at whether the contact becomes clearer with time or whether it stays foggy while still keeping you hooked. Most importantly, look at whether your nervous system is being asked to do all the translating again. Because real returns reduce guesswork. Access tests increase it. That is a powerful distinction. Real returns do not have to be perfect, but they usually move toward clarity, not away from it. Access testing tends to keep things emotionally active and structurally vague. That is why it is so confusing. There is enough signal to create hope, but not enough structure to create safety. Now, let us talk about what many anxious people do wrong in this moment. They overread the first reach out and underread the pattern that follows. They treat the first message like the main event, but the first message is often the least informative part. The real information comes after you respond. Do they step forward or sideways? Do they get clearer or vaguer? Do they hold the contact or just touch it? Do they act like someone trying to reconnect, or like someone checking whether they still can? That is where the truth usually lives. Another mistake anxious people make is becoming overly warm too quickly because they are afraid of pushing the person away again. They think, if I am soft enough, light enough, easy enough, maybe this time it will grow. But often, what that does is give the access tester exactly what they came for, without requiring anything more. They get proof that you are still open, and you get another round of uncertainty. This is why self-respect in avoidant dynamics often looks less romantic than people expect. It looks like not confusing a door knock with a return. It looks like slowing down instead of speeding up. It looks like letting them reveal whether they actually have anything to bring. It looks like not building a whole emotional future from a small message. It looks like staying in reality when your body wants to sprint into hope. None of this means you need to be cold, punishing, rude, or perform detachment. That is not the goal. The goal is not to win by withholding. The goal is to protect your nervous system from doing unpaid emotional labor for someone who has not yet shown real capacity. You do not have to slam the door. You just have to stop turning every small reach out into full emotional reentry. A grounded response is very different from an open floodgate. You can be kind without being instantly available. You can be open without being easy to slide back into. You can respond without collapsing the entire boundary no contact was trying to build. So, what would healthier handling look like when an avoidant breaks no contact to test access? First, do not answer from the first wave in your body. That first wave is usually a mix of adrenaline, relief, fear, hope, and history. It is not a good decision maker. Let the wave move through before you assign meaning. Second, respond to what is actually there, not to the future you want it to mean. If the message is casual, do not answer as if you just received a reconciliation. If the message is vague, do not fill it with depth. Meet the level of clarity they actually brought. Third, watch whether they can carry more than initiation. Initiating is easy for some avoidant people when they feel the loss of access. The harder part is whether they can tolerate the reality that follows contact. Can they hold conversation? Can they answer directly? Can they stay present once the opening is there? Can they move toward realness instead of retreating again once they know you are reachable? Fourth, notice what happens in your own body. Do you instantly abandon your boundary to reduce uncertainty? Do you become hyper-focused? Do you start living in your phone? Do you begin protecting the interaction more than protecting your peace? Those are signs that the access test is working on your nervous system, even if nothing real has changed. Fifth, require coherence over time, not just a strong first moment. Consistency is what makes a return real, not one brave reach out, not one emotional message, not one nostalgic moment. Real return is shown by repeated behavior that becomes clearer, steadier, and more accountable over time. Now, let us talk about the avoidant side with some nuance, because this matters too. Avoidant people are not all the same. Some truly do break no contact because they are trying, awkwardly, to reapproach something that matters to them. Some are terrified but sincere. Some have real feelings and weak structure. Some are slowly trying to reconnect but do not know how to do it cleanly. That is why you cannot judge only by the first reach out. You judge by whether they can tolerate the next layer of reality. Do they keep showing up? Do they acknowledge what happened? Do they become more direct as contact continues? Do they have the courage to risk being known, instead of hiding in half contact. That is what tells you whether this is a real attempt or just an access test. So yes, feelings may be present. Missing you may be real. Curiosity may be real. But feelings are not the whole story. Capacity is. That is the standard that protects you. Not whether they felt enough to send a message, whether they can do enough to make the message mean something new. This is why no contact is not only about making them miss you, it is supposed to restore your ability to see clearly. It is supposed to stop the loop where tiny signals control your whole nervous system. It is supposed to create enough space that you can tell the difference between contact and change. If no contact only turns into waiting for their next message, then the body has stayed hooked, even if the behavior changed on the outside. Real no contact includes internal sobriety. It includes not letting every ping become a prophecy. And if they do break no contact, the question is not, how do I keep them here now? The question is, what exactly are they showing me? Are they showing me courage, clarity, and follow-through? Or are they showing me that they still want access without structure? That question can save you months. Because one of the hardest truths in avoidant dynamics is this: a person can want access to you without wanting to truly build with you. They can want your warmth, your familiarity, your care, your responsiveness, your emotional home, and still not want the weight of the relationship. That is why access alone can never be the thing that convinces you. Access is cheap. Structure is expensive. Access is easy. Repair is hard. Access can come from discomfort. Real return usually costs them something: vulnerability, consistency, accountability, effort, clarity, risk. That is how you know the difference. So, if you are in that moment right now, if they broke no contact and your whole body is trying to turn that into hope, slow it down. Do not ask only, did they come back? Ask, how did they come back? What did they bring with the contact? What happened after I responded? Did the energy grow roots, or did it just create a spike? Did they move toward clarity or toward fog? Did I feel steadier or more confused? Those questions matter more than the first message ever will, because the first message may only be the test. The pattern that follows is the answer. If you are the avoidant one listening, and you know you do this, I want to say something honestly. Reaching out just to see whether someone is still there may feel small to you. It may feel harmless. It may feel like curiosity, comfort, or a moment of missing them. But if you know you are not prepared to offer clarity, if you know you disappear once access is confirmed, if you know your contact wakes someone up and then leaves them holding the emotional cost, that matters. You do not have to be perfect, but you do have to become more honest about the impact of testing access on a person who loved you. If what you miss is comfort, say less. If what you want is real reconnection, bring more. That is the adult line. And if you are the anxious one listening, this is where your healing gets real. Not when you stop caring, not when you become cold, not when you no longer feel anything. Your healing gets real when a message comes in and you stop letting hope outrun evidence. When you can feel the activation without obeying it. When you can respond from self-respect instead of fear. When you stop rewarding access checks with full emotional re-entry. When you let behavior reveal intention instead of writing intention for them because you miss them. That is hard. But that is the move that changes the pattern. Real love does not need to hide inside tests. Real repair does not need to sneak in through low-risk side doors forever. Real return can tolerate clarity. It may be awkward. It may be imperfect. It may be scared. But it moves toward truth, not just access. So, the next time an avoidant person breaks no contact, remember this. The contact may be real. The feelings may be real. The curiosity may be real. But none of that automatically means the return is real. What matters is whether the contact becomes something more honest, more stable, and more accountable after the door opens. That is the standard. Not whether they can still reach you, whether they are finally ready to meet you. And if all they wanted was proof of access, then the most loving thing you can do for yourself is stop turning access into meaning. Because sometimes, the strongest thing you can see is not that they came back. It is that they still came back the same way. Welcome to PsychBond. You're safe here.